Happy September, everyone. I decided that the most hyped months of the year for me, September and October, should have the most hyped reads. So this week we are reading 3 very, very hyped books that I could not escape from this summer, but I saved for this special reading vlog to see, are these books worth all the hype? I really hope so. For me personally, a lot of hype around a book doesn't mean that it's overhyped, because if a ton of people are talking about a book and it gets a lot of hype, that has to be for a reason. So let's introduce the 3 books before we get into this vlog. The first one is going to be God of the Woods by Liz Moore. I've seen this one everywhere. I've seen people who read only horror read it. I've seen people who don't read any sort of horror or thrillers at all read it. I've seen people who only read thrillers and mysteries read it, and I have heard a ton of people loving this one. This seems like a book that is not just on like the book internet, but also in real life. Like, people who are not big readers in my everyday life are talking about this one, set in a summer camp, so it probably was a great book to read in the summer. But I really love a good, dense historical mystery, and I think that's what it is. A little bit true crime adjacent. Definitely added it to the TBR because of just the sheer amount of hype from people all over the internet and in real life who read a variety of different genres. All seem to be loving this one. The next book that I am going to be reading this vlog is The Haar by David Sodergren. This one did not come out this year, but I saw so many people reading it for Summerween, and then because I think in particular Books and Lala read this one and loved it. I think she read it before Summerween, but because she read it this year, a ton of people have been picking it up and just absolutely loving this one. So I always really want to check out books that get like a second wave of popularity, because I think this came out a number of years ago now. I want to say 2021 or 2022, and I have just seen so many people reading this one, so I want to see what the hype's about. I definitely think that Bookstagram and BookTube tend to only sort of hype up newer releases, and I understand why people talk about newer releases as opposed to backlist more. However, it's always cool to see a book that didn't come out this year just get so many people picking it up and loving it. So I'm very intrigued to read this one, because this one has been more hyped in primarily the horror sphere, but I have seen people with very different reading tastes from each other all love this one. So let's give it a try. And then last but not least, this one I wanted to pick up like as soon as it came out. However, once I thought of this vlog, I knew I had to include it on the list because this one has been the most hyped for me for a while, and that is Incidents Around the House by Josh Malerman. This one is a haunted house story. Little kid, creepy little kid, haunting horror. Those are like a lot of my buzzwords for horror books that I really love. Again, this one, I've seen it mostly in the horror space, but I've also seen Josh Malerman and his books get picked up by a lot of people who maybe don't normally read horror and want to read something a little more spooky for the autumnal season, and I have been hearing great things about this. I think this is written a little bit non-traditionally, and I have heard from both seasoned horror readers and new to the genre people that this one is truly creepy and frightening. So those are my 3 hyped books for this vlog. Hopefully they're worth the hype. No one wants to spend the Halloween season reading just like subpar or not great horror books, so I'm hoping that the fact that I'm kicking off September vlogs with these very hyped releases, that I'll get some great reads, maybe a 5-star, maybe multiple 5 stars. We will just have to see. But let's go ahead and start this vlog. The first book that I'm going to be picking up is God of the Woods by Liz Moore. So I am now 25% of the way through the God of the Woods, and I'm really enjoying it so far. I am listening to it on audiobook. I was a little nervous at first that it might be a little bit hard to keep track of everything because we jump backward and forward in time, and we also follow a lot of different characters. However, even though that can seem intimidating, I think Liz Moore is doing a really good job of really differentiating the characters, so it's pretty easy to keep up with. I'd recommend, if you are someone who struggles with a lot of different characters, and not only characters, but points of view that maybe you make like notes for yourself, a little bit of a character chart to help you figure out who is who. But this story takes place at a summer camp, and the story kicks off with one of the campers going missing. However, she is not just any camper, she is the daughter of the owners of the camp. And not only that, but these camp owners, their son also went missing in the same woods that this young girl is now missing in. He went missing like decades before, so this is a very cyclical, scary situation for this family to be in. That happens at the very start of the story. Barbara, the tween girl, goes missing, and we are following so many different points of view from both right before this happened and then right after this happened to explore how this disappearance really impacted a whole entire community. We have the perspectives of a bunkmate with Barbara, her camp counselor that was in charge of that specific group of counselors, her mother, several different people in the town. It's very, very engaging. I definitely think this one categorize it more as a mystery than a thriller, because not only is it a very large book, I think it's in the 400-page range, but you know, it's very slow paced. It really takes its time building up the main characters and the side characters even, and just really getting a perspective on every single person that is touched by this event and the variety of different things that could have happened to Barbara. So 25% of the way in, I'm really loving this. I really love the historical aspect of it, because the main timeline when Barbara goes missing is in the 1970s. So I definitely see how this popped off this summer because of the nostalgic summer camp setting, but I'm really loving this one. I definitely have to read a lot of it today because I have it checked out from my library as a Libby audiobook, and I've got about like one more day to complete it. So I am going to be listening to a lot of it today, but so far so good. The first 25%, I am hooked. I really am curious as to what is going on and uncovering the mystery of not only like how Barbara disappeared, what happened to her, but just how all of these people are going to interconnect and how they are relevant to the story and if they had anything to do with the disappearance. So I am invested. I'm gonna keep reading, and I will check back in later with another reading update. So yesterday I finished The God of the Woods. I did not think that I was going to be able to. I was on a mission. My Libby library hold, it was going to expire that day, and I was like, I don't think I can do this, but I did in fact read it. And I think that's a testament to how engaging this book was and how much I enjoyed it. I was listening to it for a very long period of time, but at no point did I feel like, ugh, I wish I didn't have to read this all in one go, or at no point did I feel like, oh, I need to take a break from this audiobook. It's not engaging. This was an almost 500-page book that did not feel like that long. It really flew by. I was so invested with not only the mystery, but just getting behind all of the different character motivations and learning their backstories, because this is not only a mystery, or I would say more of like a literary thriller, but it was also like a character study and examining the ways in which a singular event can impact an entire town for generations. And then not only that, but how there seems to be two separate criminal justice systems depending on how wealthy you are and how much privilege you have, and all of the factors that go into liberty and justice for all being more or less accessible for you. So I really enjoyed this one. I totally get the hype. I'm actually reading this one with my mom. We have like a very informal book club where we try and read the same book once every month or once every other month. And I immediately, when I was finished with this one, I texted her and I was like, The God of the Woods is really good. You gotta finish it. I cannot wait to talk to you about it. And I really enjoyed this one. The hype for this one, I would say, is absolutely deserved. deserved. This is definitely a story where it does go into some darker territory, but if you are not someone who normally picks up horrors or normally even picks up thrillers, I think that this could be a really good read. Like if you like historical fiction, this does mostly take place in the 1970s. It does go back in time to the 50s and 60s as well. So if you like historical fiction, you might enjoy this one. And then if you like literary character studies, there's a lot of that in here as well. So know that like going into it, it does deal with a missing child and it is like a criminal investigation. But I think this is one that a lot of people could love, even if you don't primarily read horrors and thrillers and mysteries. So I just really enjoyed this one. Definitely feels like a summer book. I know I said like me personally, I'm like mentally in the fall mindset. I am so ready for September and October and the autumnal weather and the leaves changing, all of that. But it is still very hot where I live in Arkansas, very much summer weather still. And this was a very good read for that. You know, it takes place at a summer camp and I just really enjoyed this one. So overall, the first book in this vlog was a success. I really enjoyed it and I definitely understand why this is so hyped. I definitely think that this book is worth the hype. Now we are moving on to the second book in this vlog, The Haar by David Sodergren. This is, I believe, a horror about a small isolated town. I'm not too sure. I'm intrigued. The cover is very terrifying. I have this checked out from the library as an audiobook, so I'm gonna get to listening and I will check back in tomorrow with a reading update. So I am now 20% of the way through The Haar. I'm listening to it on audiobook and that's definitely a great choice because the audiobook narrator has a great Scottish accent. It's really putting me into this book and really bringing this story to life for me because we are following our main character, Muriel Macaulay. She is one of now just a handful of people that live on this Scottish fishing island of Witch Haven. It used to be about 50 or so people, a very small community, but there are only about 10 people left living in this town because an overseas developer is trying to buy out all of the land for a golf course. Muriel does not want to sell because this is a beautiful area of land, but it's also the land where she grew up. She's lived her whole life here. She met and married her now deceased husband. She raised her child here. Like, this is a very important place to her. Obviously, it's her home and she does not want to sell. She's one of a few holdouts and the corporation is using increasingly more insidious ways to try and push these people out of this land so he can build a golf course. So that is a little bit infuriating. I don't actually know, 20% of the way in, that's kind of all we've really gotten. I believe that this is going to involve some sort of eco-horror, like the land kind of taking itself back or something or someone kind of defending the land from these developers. But so far this is horrible. Like, it's not scary for me as the reader, but it's terrifying for the characters like Muriel because she has nowhere to go and she does not want to sell her home. She is very elderly. She kind of gets the impression that once she leaves her house and once she sells her home, she'll probably have to go to a nursing home and she does not want to do that. This community is so important to her. The land is so important to her and she does not want to see the land being developed and just changed from a gorgeous historical fishing town to a golf course. So the things that are happening to these townspeople are awful on behalf of this corporation, the way that they're kind of bending the rules and then, you know, telling the townspeople, take it up with your lawyer, knowing that these people do not have the funds to pay for a lawyer to fight against this corporation's lawyer. Very chilling stuff. So, you know, 20% of the way in, I'm not really far enough to have gotten to like the actual horror in this story for the reader. It's obviously horrific for the characters, but I am still at that place where I am just learning the stakes, learning more about this beautiful town and the people who still live there and the people who want to fight for their home. And I'm very curious. I'm very curious to see where this story is going. So that is what I'm going to do today. The audiobook is immensely readable, and because the narrator has a Scottish accent, I don't know. I think she is from Scotland. I don't think it's someone just doing a Scottish Scottish accent, but because of that, I can't listen to it. Normally, I listen to audiobooks on 1.25 times speed. I'm listening to this one at 1.5 times speed because the Scottish accent, I think it's one of those accents that tends to be a little bit faster. People tend to talk a little bit faster, so it sounds more natural when you speed it up a little bit. So this is not a very long audiobook at all. I anticipate on reading a lot of it today. Looking forward to it, and I will talk to y'all tomorrow with another update, let you know how I'm liking it. Okay friends, so I finished The Haar by David Sodergren, and overall I did really enjoy this one. This one is, dare I say, like a cozy body horror. Now that is not to say I don't think this is cozy horror, and I don't think that this is a book for potentially beginners to horror because there is a lot of graphic body horror content and it does get a little much. I know that I read a lot of horror, so I'm a little bit more like desensitized to these sort of things, but I do think this is an excellent gateway into body horror because while the body horror is there and there's a lot of it, it's balanced out pretty well with an emotionally driven story and a lot of character development and other things going on. It's body horror that overall doesn't feel like too mean-spirited. Like there is a method to who is getting who the body horror is happening to. So while it does go there, I do think that this is a good introduction for people who want to get into body horror. Not necessarily people who want to get into horror, but definitely I think this is like an easily accessible body horror story. This is a cryptid story, which I'm always looking for book recommendations for, and this really does give Shape of Water vibes, and a little bit of that was why this wasn't like a full 5 stars for me, but I did enjoy this one overall. I will be picking up more by this author, but just this was oddly romance heavy, which I wasn't a fan of, but I do appreciate most of the moving parts of this story. The villains in this story I think could be considered a little cartoonish at times. However, if you look at billionaires like in real life and the out of touch and out of pocket things that they say, you know, they sound a little cartoonish in real life too, so that did not bother me so much. I also thought that this book had great commentary about the way in which we treat the elderly. We have a tendency to either infantilize them or just completely push them out of the picture and ignore them and ignore their needs and just not like treat them like real people. I thought that commentary was really well done in here. David Sodergren actually at the end of this book, he includes memoirs from his grandma, which was an inspiration for Muriel, which I thought was so lovely. That was actually one of my favorite parts of this story, was reading his grandma's memoirs. I thought that was really cool to see. I think it really added a lot of context for this book, and the history lover in me just really enjoys reading like a little snippet of historical memoir written by just like an average person during a specific time period. So I really enjoyed that. I didn't love the romancy elements of this one. I thought that they were done a little bit strangely, but not enough in a way that made me hate the book. Just they were my least favorite parts. Just some of the decisions that are made, particularly towards like the latter half, I didn't love, but I loved the concept of this. I thought this was done really well. It's really strange to read a book that has just such intense gore and then such sweet and compelling and heartbreaking moments, like all within the same book, and this is a shorter book as well. So I enjoyed it overall. I'll definitely be checking out more David Sodergren. As for why this one is hyped, let's dive into that. I'm actually pleasantly surprised that this is getting a lot of hype on BookTube because it's definitely a lot more character driven than I feel like a lot of people tend to prefer. I know I'm really generalizing here, but I have noticed that really character-driven stories are more divisive. Generally, this one also came out in 2022, but the audiobook actually didn't release until this year. So I think that does play a large part into why this is getting a second wave of hype, and I'm really pleasantly surprised because our main protagonist is 84 years old, and that is something we don't see a lot of in fiction in general, but in particular horror fiction, The Final Girl, all of that. Like, our main protagonists are not really elderly, and I thought that plus the combined exploration of just the way we view getting older and view the elderly in our society was really spot on, and I'm really pleasantly surprised to see a book with such an older protagonist getting hyped. So I was really pleasantly surprised by this one. It's a body horror with a whole lot of heart, and that is just not referring to just the hearts that are being ripped out of bodies, but also just the emotional beats in this one were really well done. So I enjoyed this one. This vlog is going great so far. Let's move on to the third and final book in this vlog, and that is going to be Incidents Around the House by Josh Malerman. This is the only one I'm reading physically. The other two I did via audio. I may try out the audiobook for this one, but this is narrated by a child, and sometimes children narrators are really hit or miss for me on audiobooks because they're always done by adults. So just depending on how that's done, it really can be a horrible or a great reading experience for me. So we are starting this one out physically. I am so excited to read this one. This is the one that I have the highest expectations for, that I have placed the most hype upon myself. So I'm gonna go get to reading. I will check back in later with another reading update. So I am now 9 chapters into Incidents Around the House by Josh Malerman. We are following our main character, Bella. She's an 8-year-old girl, and she lives with her mommy and her daddo and other mommy. Other mommy lives in her closet and keeps asking Bella this strange question, can I go into your heart? From page 1, this book hits the ground running with such a layer of creepiness because chapter 1 is only this paragraph, and it says, "Good night, daddo. Good night, mommy. Mommy and daddo leave my room. I pull the covers up to my chin. Other mommy comes out of the closet. Hi, I say, I'm so excited to meet you again." So right out of the gate, we have this very creepy, very unsettling narration style. It's told from the point of view of a child, so this is written very non-traditionally. There aren't any quotation marks to signify dialogue, and the spacing is a little bit off as well, and I think that really adds to immediately you are immersed in the mind of Bella. You are reading this story through the eyes of a child, and so far, I think Josh Malerman is doing that really well. It's so creepy. Bella has this strange entity that's living in her closet, and the way that she goes about her problems like very much feels like the way a child would go about it, something horrible living in her closet, as opposed to how an adult would deal with it. And not just other mommy, but there are other things happening within this family. There's some strife, some conflict that Bella as a child doesn't fully grasp the implications of, but as the reader, as an adult reader, you do. And so adding that turmoil, which even though Bella doesn't quite understand, she can pick up on the turmoil within the family, and that's like adding to her not wanting to tell her mom and dad about other mommy because she does not want other mommy to hurt her parents. So this is very creepy. This is very creepy so far, and I'm really enjoying it. The chapters are very short. There's not a lot of text on the pages just because of the way that this story is told. So like, for example, I'm holding it far away so you can't like see and accidentally get spoiled by anything, but there are a lot of spaces between the dialogue and the internal narration that Bella is doing, and I just think it's very, very effective, and I'm having a good time reading it. So much so that like I want to stop talking about it right now. I just want to dive right back in. So that is what I'm going to do. I'm gonna go read more of Incidents Around the House. This one definitely I'm gonna try and create an ambiance because I have a feeling this book has the potential to really creep me out. So we're going to turn all of the lights off. We're gonna draw the shades, put on an ambiance, and read by candlelight because this is really creepy so far. So I am on the couch. I am about 40% through this book, and this book is very chilling. I'm reading it home alone with my dogs, and I am getting very creeped out, which is not an easy feat for me since I do read so much horror. So yeah, I'm really enjoying it so far. In particular, what I love about this one is that there is no doubt that Other Mommy is not a figment of Bella's imagination. Other Mommy, we don't know what she is, but we do know that she is real. She is some sort of paranormal entity, and just the things that are happening in this house and the paranormal activity where it's kind of like innocuous at first and then it just ramps up and keeps getting crazier and crazier. I am just really enjoying this one. I don't want to jinx myself, but this is giving could be 5-star feeling. So I'm gonna go get back to reading this, and I'll check back in with y'all later. Hey friends, so I finished Incidents Around the House last night. I have the graphic up here because this morning I did have to go to the library and return a number of books, and because this due date was coming up soon for this book, I figured since, you know, I just finished it, might as well go ahead and return it with the rest of the books. So I do have, you know, that's why I have this graphic for this last update. But I pretty much, I think I read, like 2 days ago I read until chapter 9, and then the rest of the book I read yesterday, and it was a whole lot of fun. I really enjoyed this one. To me, it lived up to the hype. I had a lot of fun. However, this one I could also see how people would really hate it and it wouldn't work for them because the way that this is written, it's very experimental, and I know child narrators for a lot of people are an immediate no-go. Now, I have heard since I started and ended up finishing this book that the audiobook is actually a really good audiobook when it comes to narration. So if that is something that is making you nervous, that it's narrated by a child, I've heard that the audiobook is good, and I really enjoyed the physical book as well. But I could definitely see how the narration style and the way the book is formatted could annoy some people. Personally, for me, I enjoyed it, but I definitely can see some critiques there. This book had a lot of very scary moments. For me, it did kind of lose momentum at the end of the book. The ending, just the way that everything wrapped up, was not ideal. I think the first half of this one was better than the second half, but overall I had a blast reading it. This is going to be a little bit of a weird comparison, but hear me out. I would almost compare this book to a Paranormal Activity movie because we have some genuinely creepy, scary moments. We have kind of a non-traditional storytelling style, whether that be from the eyes of a child or found footage. In both, you're going to have some good scares, some creepy moments. The parents in both situations are not very likable, but they make very realistic decisions and also sometimes very stupid decisions. But of course, hindsight is 2020. We're the ones reading the book, we're not the ones in the situation. So a lot of that is very similar in terms of tone. And then also, like the Paranormal Activity movies, I think the less you see of Other Mommy, the scarier she is. At the beginning, I think she's a whole lot scarier than at the end of the book because I think we almost like see too much of her, and that's just, I think that's something that horror movies have to deal with as well. When you're getting little creepy snippets and your mind almost creates something more terrifying than what ends up actually being reality. So for all of those reasons, you know, I would say Incidents Around the House feels like a Paranormal Activity movie because they're both they're fun times. They're fun times. They're really solid paranormal thrillers having to deal with a dark entity in a haunted house, and both, you know, storylines, well, depends on what Paranormal Activity movie you watch, but both of them have to deal with like child protagonists or children that are essential or really central to the haunting. So a little bit of a weird comparison, but you know, if you enjoyed Paranormal Activity movies, then you'd probably like this book. And if you have problems with the Paranormal Activity movies, because I don't think they're perfect, then those are probably the same critiques you'll find about this book. So I had a whole lot of fun. This would definitely be a great book to read like during Halloween because I think it's just such a classic, quintessential haunted house story, but with a little bit of a twist. I had a lot of fun. As for why this is hyped, I think, you know, a haunted house premise is very popular in horror. It's a very popular subgenre, and Josh Malerman is an author that has had big successes like Bird Box before. So I understand why going into it, this book was getting a lot of hype. And then once people actually started reading it, I think the non-traditional storytelling and then just like the very classic haunted house tropes of there's an entity, the child starts seeing it, the parents get involved. That is very classic bread and butter for horror, but the way that the family reacts in this scenario, I really like. So for me, it absolutely lived up to the hype, and that brings us to the end of this reading vlog. I read 3 really great books in this vlog. Definitely a successful vlog. I definitely see the hype in all of them. I would have to say probably my least favorite would be the Haar, but that's not saying much because I did really enjoy all 3 books in this vlog. This one I just think has the least staying impact in terms of overall plot structures. The romance in here I didn't really love, but I did enjoy like the body horror aspects of it, the commentary of it, and I definitely will be checking out more by this author. And then the other 2, I don't know. I think The God of the Woods is more like classic. I think this one has the most widespread appeal. Like this one is a book that I would recommend to so many different people who read very different genres, and I think they would all get something out of it. I think it's one of the most well-written and well-done mystery thriller books that I've read in quite some time, and I just think that this one has a lot of staying power. This one feels like the most literary like this one feels like an award-winning book. And Incidents Around the House, like it was a lot of fun. I think it's my favorite Josh Malerman. I'd have to look back on it because he has such an extensive backlist at this point, and I really have tended to like most of what I've read by him, but this one could be my favorite by him. So it's a toss-up. I think The God of the Woods is like a great year-round pick, and it'll probably have more staying power on me, but Incidents Around the House was a super fun reading experience, and as someone who is a horror reader, just the first initial setup of this story actually got me a little nervous, got me a little scared when I was reading a book, and that doesn't often happen. So all in all, this vlog definitely a success. Thank you all so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, and subscribe to my channel for all of the bookish, horror, and cozy gaming content. Stay safe, stay spooky, and I will see y'all in the next video. Bye!